Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 33, and I'm reading from the New International Version. Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. So I want to begin this morning by reminding us what Jesus is not talking about. Jesus is not saying we can't enter into formal agreements. He's specifically talking about oaths. He's not, for instance, talking about covenants. God makes covenants. He made one with Israel at Mount Sinai, and he makes one with us in Jesus. Covenants are agreements that specify the nature of a relationship and the consequences of not living up to each other's responsibilities in it. They're like contracts, but a little more personal. That's not what Jesus is talking about here. It's important we don't throw everything into this word. Oaths are a very specific category of human speech, and that's what Jesus is asking us to think about. And oaths grow out of a culture that assumes that the native tongue of people is lying. Oaths help to encourage a continuum of speech. The stronger the oath, the more truthful you're supposed to be. The less fervent the oath, the more it's okay to deceive. So what we're going to talk about today, what Jesus is really targeting in this teaching, is the human capacity to lie. Deception. That's what he's targeting in his insistence that we should stop using oaths. So we're going to think about lying today and what kind of a correction Jesus is trying to make. I read an article this week. It's a year old now. It's a 2017 article from National Geographic, and it's entitled, Why We Lie, the Science Behind Our Deceptive Ways. So the article is talking about a study that was done to help identify why people lie and for what purposes. And the results of the article are these. 36% of lies, statistically, are intended to protect ourselves. About 44% of lies are intended to promote ourselves, to make us look better maybe than we have a right to look. About 11% of lies are intended to protect or to promote others. And then 9% of our lies are like when you say to your child, why didn't you tell me the truth? And they say to you, I don't know. That's actually true about 9% of the time. About 9% of the time, we don't really know why we lied. Interestingly enough, according to this survey, the most honest people, percentage-wise to the things they say, are either people under 8. They're the most honest, people under 8. And the next most honest are people over 60. The most likely to lie, between the ages of 13 and 17. And what I want you to see in those statistics is a lot of that has to do with fear. We lie most of the time to protect ourselves or to promote ourselves. So lying is usually a type of wall that we build around ourselves to protect us from something we think is a threat. Interestingly, though, this capacity to deceive is considered a sign of proper child development. So it's an interesting subject to talk about. When Jesus introduces the idea that in the kingdoms of the heavens, there will be no oaths, that simple comment upends fundamentally all human interaction. As we consider Jesus' good news about the coming kingdom of the heavens today, we're going to look at the role that oaths play in law, in lying, and then what it would mean to be free of the world in which this is necessary as we talk about our liberty in Christ. So those will be our 3 points. We're going to start with the law, lying under the law, oaths and their place in the law. Look at verse 33 of Matthew 5. Again, you've heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. So the law begins in a world in which people are more apt to deceive each other than they are to tell the truth to each other for various reasons, mostly because of fear. What the law does is it creates a space for truthfulness. That's the beginning. That's the first step. So generally people lie. We don't know if we can trust them or not. People say all kinds of things for all different kinds of reasons. But if we create this category of speech called oath, then at least we can enforce the expectation that truth will be spoken in this space. So what the law begins to do is carve out a space for truth and then create penalties for not being truthful in that space. Now, in another kind of world, where truth is the native tongue, you would need to make an oath to assure people you're lying. But that's not the world we live in. The way we use oaths is proof of the deceptiveness of our culture. The law of Moses began to turn us towards truthfulness by creating categories of speech in which deception would result in penalty. And so in this way, the law begins by curtailing the damaging effects of lying on a culture. Because if nobody can trust anybody about anything, the world falls apart, as you know. So the law begins by creating a space for truth and penalties for lying within that space. We can't outlaw lying. It's impossible to do. The source of lying is human fear, a desire to be thought well of or to be protected from others. And as long as that fear exists, you can try outlawing lying all you want. It's never going to work. There's never been a government on earth that has ever said every liar will be executed, because pretty soon you'd have no one left to do the executing. So what the law does is it simply creates spaces in which we need truthfulness to be. That's lying under the law. And oaths are that attempt to curtail a lie's power. But here's the question for you and for me. Would you like to live in a world in which lying no longer exists? Telling the truth is a very vulnerable act. It's why children learn almost immediately to cloak themselves in lies. It's a dangerous thing to speak the truth. But if you followed Jesus, really followed him, the vision of living in a world in which we don't have to be on our guard at all times, a world in which we can trust that the person we're talking to believes that what they're saying is truthful, what good news that would be. That's the world Jesus is inviting us to live into. Oaths remind us that we don't live there yet. So let's think about oaths and their relationship to lying. Matthew chapter 5, verses 34 to 36. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it's God's throne, or by the earth, for it's his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. So lying, as I've been saying throughout, is our first layer of defense against a dangerous world. It's kind of like our clothing. It presents itself as a protection, and we learn those survival techniques really, really young. But if we look at when children learn how to lie, we might come to understand the perniciousness of it. I read an article this week. It's also 2017. This is a National Public Radio article, an NPR article entitled, "When Children Begin to Lie, There's Actually a Positive Takeaway." The article says this: when children start to lie, it means they understand that other people have different beliefs than they do. It means that they understand that people's beliefs do not directly reflect reality, but vary based on experience. Skipping a little. Before age 4, children have simpler beliefs about how minds work. They often think that everyone shares the same beliefs and that beliefs are direct reflections of what is objectively going on in the world. Younger children expect their parents to know if they're dressed or not, have been to the bathroom or not, and where they put their shoes, regardless of who was around when any of these things happened or didn't. Because they expect people's minds to contain direct copies of reality, younger children do not even try to deceive. Playing hide and seek with a young 3-year-old will confirm that they simply do not yet understand the concept of deception. Children of this age delight in telling the seeker exactly where they plan to hide. Lies are walls that we build around ourselves. Oaths in that system, ideally, are spaces in which we're not only compelled to tell the truth, but allowed to tell the truth. This is what the confessional is in Roman Catholicism, right? When you know that you can't be penalized for the things you say, people gush. They want to speak the truth, but they're afraid of speaking it. Oaths give you permission in the law to be truthful, at least for this period of time, without reprisal. And that is a great freedom. If we could just lean into that and realize how freeing it would be to be truthful at all times, we might understand what Jesus is trying to give to us. But again, and I'll say it again, a culture that requires oaths is a culture that deceives. So what kind of liberty is Jesus offering to us if we were to forsake the making of oaths? What would happen? Look at verse 37. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. Now, truth, we're not talking about truth, capital T. The actual facts of reality, none of us can know with certainty. Only God knows truth, capital T, with certainty. So we're not talking about truth, capital T here. We're talking about truth, little t. The things you believe to be true, honestly believe to be true. Truth, little t. They may be right, they may be wrong, but you believe them. That's what we're talking about. And those truths will be limited by your ignorance, so you're not going to be right about everything, even when you speak truthful. Speaking truthfully does not mean always speaking correctly. It doesn't not mean that. But so you can be limited by your ignorance. And the truth for Christians is not some sort of a calloused, cruel, unkind blathering in which we assault people with our opinions. It's not that either for Christians, because Christians are those who are indwelt with the Holy Spirit, and the fruit of the Spirit is beginning to affect everything about us, including the way we speak. So the fruit of the Spirit is love, which is loyalty to each other, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. So when we talk about Christians speaking truth, we're not talking about some truth you spoke because you got angry, lost your temper, and said everything you've been bottling up for 5 years. That's not Christian truthfulness. That is a fit of rage. That is of the flesh. But when our speech is true to our honest perceptions, and it is tempered by the fruit of the Spirit being born within us, what we speak will not only be safe for others, and it will be safe for others, but it will begin to help us live into a world in which we are free. That's what Jesus is beginning to say. Now, when you hear that phrase, the evil one, right? Everything else comes from the evil one. Those who've been raised in the church, you jump right to one evil one, right? Satan, right? Many of us would jump there, and he certainly qualifies. But the word the evil one is just a Hebrew euphemism. It means the one who would do you harm, the one who wants to hurt you. It's just a euphemism, and certainly Satan qualifies. He certainly wants to hurt you, so that's fine. He certainly qualifies. But a lot of other people qualify too. So when it says anything else comes from the evil one, Jesus is more or less saying, anyone who swears an oath to you is someone you cannot trust. Anyone who swears an oath to you is someone you cannot trust. They're borrowing from a value system that assumes lying to be more natural. And Jesus is telling you such people are not safe. Now, some people come by that opinion very rightly. I mean, some of us have been lied to so many times we don't trust anyone. And so we want people to make oaths because we don't really believe that anybody is telling us our truth. Okay, I don't trust anybody either. I've been lied to a lot. I don't know who here I can trust and not. I understand that. I get it. But Jesus is saying you don't need to require oaths because oaths do nothing. Oaths don't do anything to guarantee truth. Covenants do, right? When you have a signed legal document, that does something, but oaths don't do anything to guarantee truth. Especially as Jesus notices, when people swear by things they have no control over anyway. I swear on my mother's grave. Well, what's the consequence of getting that wrong? What's your mother going to do? Putting my hand on a Bible, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. What was promised there? What's the penalty for not doing it? All we said was that God would help us to tell the truth. We didn't say anything about what he'd do to us if we didn't. So what's the penalty? Perjury is already an actionable offense, right? The oath just reminds people of what's at stake. The oath is meaningless. We could just as easily say you're expected to tell the truth as you understand it fully and completely, and if we ever get enough evidence to prove that you're not telling the truth, you will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Do you understand that? And the person could say yes. And that's all we would need to do. There's no need for an oath. The oath is meant as play acting at best. Or at worst, the oath justifies the assumption that it's okay to lie at all other times, just not right now. Jesus is asking us to step away from the game, to step away from the idea that truth is only appropriate in certain spaces, that I can generally be deceptive unless I'm in this certain space, unless I'm making an oath, unless I'm making a promise, unless I'm before a court of law, unless I'm talking to an authority, whatever. Jesus is saying, jump out of that. Stop making oaths. Just give up the idea that lies are your native tongue, and let's just accept the fact that what Jesus expects is that lies are rare. You might say, no, Jesus expects that there be no lies. Well, I can't say for certain because like Rahab lied and said she wouldn't reveal where the spies were even though she knew where they were and she was blessed for it. So I'm not going to get into all of the stories you have to go through to figure out if absolute truthfulness in every circumstance is godly. You wrestle with that. You wrestle with that. Jesus is asking us to step out of that game where the general expectation would be that we would speak the truth. And a lie would be something we would wrestle and struggle over saying. We would really bandy it about, like Corrie ten Boom did when the Nazi soldiers came to her house and said, "Are you hiding Jewish people here?" And she was hiding them under her table, and she had to decide, what is appropriate here? Do I lie and protect them, or do I speak the truth and sacrifice them? And she decided to bridge the gap and speak a kind of a half-truth and say they're under the table. And they were under the table, under the floorboards, but they weren't literally under the table, like under the table. So when the soldiers saw it, they laughed and thought, oh, that's funny, and they moved on. Good for her, but that wasn't truthful. I mean, it was kind of truthful, but it was deceptive too. She kind of split the difference because she didn't know what to do. That you might be in circumstances where you wrestle like that, and that's just godly wrestling. You have to decide what to do. But your general orientation should be truth. Oaths assume that your general orientation is lies, and it's the truth that needs to be struggled over. If we're truthful people, if we let go of this game that we're playing with the oaths, if we just speak the truth as we understand it, kindly and loving and patiently, as Jesus asks us to, there will be some immediate consequences in your life. Jesus is saying, if you want to be free of a culture of lying, stop using cultural expressions that are rooted in the expectation that a lie is more likely or more natural than the truth. Just say the truth and you'll watch your life change. Vows are most likely, and this is why Jesus associates them with the evil one, with those who do harm. Vows are most likely to be used either as a manipulative technique to gain control and trust where none is warranted, or they're used by someone who has proven to be untruthful in the past, but in this instance wants to be believed. If we simply let our yes be yes and our no be no, we will leave the world of oaths behind. And with leaving the world of oaths behind, we will leave the world in which lies are expected behind with them. That's Jesus' expectation. The law began by creating a space for truth, but the intention of the law was that that space would become all the space. The question for you and I is, can we really commit to that kind of truthfulness? When Jesus says to you, stop making oaths, just say yes or no, what he's saying to you is stop hiding, just be open. Just be honest. It's the dishonesty that's keeping you a slave. When we lie to each other, we fundamentally upend the life God's creating. So that happens in marriage, it happens in communities, it happens in culture. Goodness sakes, we're watching it happen in politics. Like, we have to leave oaths behind. We have to just speak the truth with the fruit of the Spirit, kindly, gently, patiently, and self-control, but the truth nonetheless. And the question is, church, will we do this? Speaking truths about other people might satisfy your conscience a little, make you feel like you're a truthful person because I'm not hiding my feelings, but you're deceived. You're entering into sin. You're speaking truth in sinful ways. We need to speak truth in godly ways. We need to be truthful about ourselves. Are we ready, church, to be vulnerable with what's true about us? Can we leave oaths behind? Can we say yes and no?